All right, guys, today we're just doing basic brake job, but the idea is to show you the tools that I use that make this as easy as possible. So time is money here. Pretty much I charge a flat rate per axle for doing brakes. So if I can do this in an hour, I get my full rate. If I can do it in half an hour, I get double my rate, which I would like to do. And if it takes me 3 hours, then I have a bad day. So having the proper tools for every application is essential to making sure this is as easy as possible, and that's exactly what I want. So the first thing, I want to be comfortable. So this is my Wen Tools rolling shop stool that I use, and this is adjustable on height. It also has a tray underneath for storing parts and tools. All right, I also want to protect my hands from any hazardous chemicals and things, plus keep them clean. So I prefer these Raven gloves. I like these because they are 7 mil thick, and the 7 mil thickness is tough enough that it's got really good puncture resistance. These aren't going to just tear at the slightest sharp edge that it catches, but also it's very comfortable and allows for really good dexterity so that I can hand tighten bolts and things like that and really be able to feel what I'm doing. So that's what I use for my hand protection. All right, again, time is money here, and you don't want to spend all day with some of these newer vehicles where they aren't standard socket sizes on the lug nuts. Now this one is, but very often you'll find cars using half-size lugs, and you can strip the lugs if you aren't careful, or you'll just have your socket jam on them so tight you can't remove them. So that's where this comes in. This is a Steelman Pro half-size lug set, and basically you can see we've got, for example, 21 and a half, 22 and a half, and they're flip sockets. So these are handy if you've got odd lug nut size, and you just simply use this and just use it like a regular socket, and you're going to save a lot of time. And once again, time is money. So I used to use air tools, but not for the last several years since switching to the Dewalt power tools. This is a Dewalt impact gun. It's a 1/2 inch impact. I have had this for probably about 10 years or so. I know they've upgraded. We'll give you the upgraded link in the video description here. But this tool here is absolutely bulletproof. Just zips those lugs right off. Again, time is money here. All right, this wheel does not have any locking wheel lugs on it. Again, time is money here, and we want to be prepared. Sometimes the customer has lost their wheel lock, or they left it at the last place that they had tires or brakes done, and you've got the wheel lock on there and you can't remove it. So you get a big time waste right from the start of your job. There's a couple solutions to that. One of them is this Nieko kit. This is a locking lug kit with a lot of the most common locking lugs. So all kinds of very common key sets. Won't work on every car, but I've had pretty good luck with this, except for European models. European models tend to use more of like this triple square kind of a setup, but that's okay because there's a companion set here. And this is a similar set, but as you can see, it's got a bunch of triple square type patterns here. And that's very useful for like your Audis, Volvos that have those locking lugs. Sometimes the wheel has its own locking lug version in that the lug nut is completely stripped. Often I find this when somebody was stuck on the side of the road with a flat tire and they used their tire iron that didn't fit exactly, maybe because they have that half-size lug nut thing or something going on, and the lug nuts are totally stripped. In that case, the THINKWORK kit here, this is amazing. This makes such quick, easy work. It's got all these fluted designs that the harder you turn once that bites into that stripped lug, the more that it grabs. And we've got all kinds of sizes that are guaranteed to fit every lug nut. They're also fairly thin wall, so these should be able to fit even on those tire designs where they have very thin fittings here for the lug nuts. Okay, one of the things that I like to do for customers is I like to show them the work that they need so that I just don't sound like I'm trying to upsell on unnecessary things. For that, I use a couple of tools. One of the things I like to do if I suspect that they need new tires, I'll use this Jaco tire tread gauge. You just simply push down on it, push until the flat surface meets the tread. We can see we're almost at 8/32 of an inch, which is a brand new tire. So they certainly don't need tires here. All right, as we can see, these brake pads are a little bit thin, but I like to give a quantitative estimate on that. So what I'm going to do is use this tool here. This is a brake pad measurement tool, and you can see that it's got in the green, the yellow, and the red if you really need replacement. I'm going to go ahead and just lay that up right against the brake pad right there, and I can measure that this brake pad's at 4 millimeters. We're ready for replacement. One thing I really like about it is the shape of this allows me to get through most wheels without removing the wheel. And I can measure the brake pad, so I can do it right there in front of a customer without even removing the wheel. All right, this is what I use as a battery operated ratchet. This one, again, this is a tool review channel. No complaints about any of the tools that I've shown so far. Everything is bulletproof. This one, I like this because it's inexpensive. That's the main thing. But it does have a couple of limitations on this. One of them is I'm totally fine to use this to take this caliper bolt off and loosen it up like that. However, on the actual caliper bracket bolts, which are really tight, I don't use this to loosen or tighten bolts in high torque situations. You're probably going to strip the gears in it. The other thing too is that it has a fairly long swing to engage as well. So I really only use this when I break the bolts loose or to snug up bolts. But to break them loose or snug them up all the way, this is my preferred ratchet for brake work because I love the flex head. It makes it really easy to get into hard to reach spaces, and the curved handle protects you from skinning your knuckles. This is a GearWrench 84T. All right. Now, I like to keep my parts in order. I also want to make sure I don't forget any parts and leave them behind. So for that, I just like to use these Craftsmen magnetic trays like that so that I keep all my parts not only together, but also it holds them pretty strong in place so I can keep them in order. All right, now, this is a pretty basic standard design right here. Not all of them are like this, but for this design here, I'm just going to show you what I do. I'm going to use this blaster silicone lubricant and spray that on the rubber components here. And you guys are familiar with this for compressing the piston into the caliper. Forget that. That's absolutely not the way to do it, and it takes too much time. So I use this hydraulic compression tool, which is so much faster. This is going to pay for itself in absolutely no time. It's going to hook that through. This you can actually use on dual piston calipers as well, but it works fine on these single piston calipers. We're just going to squeeze the handle and press that piston right back in. That's it. I am done. Then I have a bunch of these little flexible cords here. They're not bungee cords, but they're just flexible cords. And I just like it. One twist is going to hold probably like 100 pounds, honestly. And I can just hang my caliper out of my way here, not stress the hose. And in seconds, I've got that taken care of. All right, now we need to get this caliper bracket off because we're replacing the rotors. Okay, even though these are torqued to like 100 foot-pounds, I have no problem using my gear wrench on this. Absolutely no issue. However, Sometimes these are really stuck on there, and it's not so much that I'm afraid of destroying my indestructible gear wrench, but we want to make this faster and easier. So in that case, I'm going to use this 1/2 inch gear wrench here. And in this case, the thing I like about this is it's got this adjustable locking flex head so that I can adjust it to a position and it will hold in that position. And the idea here is it's just going to make this a lot faster and easier and less stress on my hands. The other thing I like about the gear wrench is they have relatively short throws. So I get a little bit of a tight space here. I can adjust that head angle. I can get my right throw there, and that easily. I break it loose, and then I'll go to my 3/8 good wrench to finish it up. All right, we're going to put my parts in my magnetic parts tray there. And this, we've got rubber parts here. Spray those down with my silicone there. Now, sometimes, especially on the rear brakes like this, you don't have this simple design. Sometimes the rear brakes, you have to spin the piston in. It'll have little notches on the piston that you have to line up a tool and spin the piston inwards. For that, many of you guys are familiar with this little inexpensive tool which has like 8 different adapter sizes, one of which is going to fit into those notches on your piston. And then you'll use a ratchet to spin that piston in. This I call the square of death. Don't use that. Instead, I have this very inexpensive and very useful 8 Mile Lake rear disc brake set. And what this allows you to do, you just find the correct adapter, kind of like your square of death there, and you get the correct adapter. We have a forward and reverse threaded installation or removal tool. We'll demonstrate that. And the little spacer. Again, time is money. We don't want to be futzing around with that tool, so we get the correct adapter, set up our tool in there, engage with the locking tabs on the piston, and then we're just going to hold this in place, and we would just spin this handle, and eventually this backing plate is going to lock into place there. Your tabs are going to lock in. Everything's going to lock in. You can hold the backup wrench on there, and we just twist this handle to spin that caliper piston right back into place. If we wanted to back the piston out for whatever reason, we can also do that using the reverse threaded version of the tool. All right, I'm pretty lucky here that this rotor is just coming right off there. Now that's not always the case though. First of all, if we look really close here, very often the rotors will have threaded holes in here, and that's so that you could put a bolt in there, tighten the bolt down, and use that as a press tool to pop the rotor free off the hub. This rotor does not have those. So we have a couple of options. We can either hammer the rotor off, which might be undesirable if we are trying to reuse the rotor, for example, or if it's really stuck on there, we can use this tool. This is the Bonvoisin hydraulic rotor removal tool. We will do a separate review on this, but I have used this once and this works amazing. This is like a 20-ton press that will remove even the most stubborn rotor, and it's basically a 3-jaw puller on a hydraulic pump. Next thing I want to do, I want to check the runout on this rotor. This is a dial indicator setup from Shars that's really, really optimal for measuring runout on rotors. We've got this on and off magnetic base, which if you notice has a curvature to it, and that's by design because it will exactly fit onto the shock. Nestling into the shock there gives it a firm footing so that we don't get any vibration and erroneous results. Now we can set up our gauge and we can turn the rotor to measure any runout. All right, if we are going to reuse the rotor, we also need to check the thickness to make sure that we are within specification for the minimum thickness. For that, I just use this very inexpensive dial caliper here from Anytime Tools. This is digital. We just turn it on, zero it. I can change it from millimeters to inches. Nice wide jaws here. I really like this. So we can get on that rotor there like that, and we can measure our rotor thickness and make sure that we're within spec. So I want to clear this rust off of the axle hub here, and that's so our rotor will sit perfectly flush and we won't end up with any warp or anything like that. So for that, I've just got this stud rust tool here. I just put it on the end of my impact. You could put it at the end of a drill. It's got a little hole in there to go right over your lug stud. The other thing, if you look really close in there, it has wires in there to clean off the stud threads. And we're just going to go and clean off the rust. All right, look at that. Nice and clean and perfect. All right, we now want to grease up our hardware, clean up and grease our pins. For that, I use this CRC synthetic brake lubricant. I particularly use this for a couple of reasons. One of them, it offers a lot better waterproofing than other greases. The other thing is it comes with this nice handy brush that I just really like. Go ahead and brush on some grease to our caliper. All right, we are almost done. To make sure that there isn't any rattle or noise or squeals from high-pitched frequency vibration of the pads, I like to use this Permatex Disc Brake Quiet. Essentially, this is a little kind of a glue that will keep the pads stuck to the caliper mechanism instead of just free floating in there and possibly causing some vibration and noise. All right, we just let that dry for about a minute or so to tack up. And then we can just pop our brake pads right into place there. All right, now we can remove our bungee cord. These actually are useful for all kinds of things besides what I'm using it for. I use these to tie away wire harnesses out of the way, hoses out of the way, things like that. Millions of uses for these. All right, we are all done. Both sides of this vehicle done in just over half an hour because I have the right tools to make this as fast as possible. Do enough of these brake jobs and all these tools pay for themselves in just a few brake jobs.